Hi, we're Option Conservation, and this is the Shoe Room Sessions. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Richard.
Welcome to the Shoe Room. Could you tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Lisa Pinney. I'm Chief Executive of the Coal Authority. I can imagine a lot of your listeners rolling their eyes at that point. I should just say we're a public body. We predominantly deal with all the legacy of mining in this country, particularly related to coal, but also in terms of remediation of things like metal mine pollution, which is a big issue, particularly across England and Wales.
Nice. We've known each other a while, and you have one of the most incredible career arcs and stories. So that's where I'd like to start. What is your career contents page? Take us back to the beginning and take us through those chapters, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Cornwall as a child, playing in predominantly red rivers, also a few white ones. Always been interested in the environment because that's where I was. I did environmental science at Plymouth University, and from there joined the Environment Agency. So I worked as a summer student, particularly on the electrofishing teams, but also really exciting where I got to go out and scoop up swans and other animals that were roadkill effectively to take them to the lab. So that was one of my first.
I mean, that's the glamorous
one of my
bit,
first
anyway.
jobs. That was the highly glamorous aspect of that. And then finished uni. Really wanted to kind of carry on in that sector. Applied for my first job there. Didn't get it on the basis that they didn't have a women's toilet in that depot. And I think the crazy thing, I talk about this a lot, the crazy thing is that I didn't think that was that crazy, which kind of just shows, I think, sometimes some of the environment, the context that you grew up in. But kind of carried on, really pleased. I got another job in a depot slightly further into East Cornwall, so I think clearly had different rules, different toilets, certainly. But no, and I've had a fantastic kind of opportunity that worked kind of every staff grade, a big range of jobs, particularly around environmental regulation.
That ever did in terms of that trajectory of understanding the whole thing. That was certainly unique to you, I think.
It was, it was fantastic. I mean, amazing kind of opportunities. Through that, I had a sabbatical, went to Canada for a year, still worked for the Environment Agency, kind of part-time while I was out there on an international project, which was great. And then had the opportunity to be the youngest female executive manager that they've had, which was a great opportunity. So did that working for Paul Leinster and Chris Smith and Barbara Young before Paul, as their kind of chief of staff, I suppose, kind of head of strategic coordination. So dealing with all the kind of politics, sponsorship kind of side, which was really interesting, as well as a lot of kind of comms and engagement across the business. And then eventually went back out into operations, and my last role there was as director of the West Midlands.
Amazing. So the story about the lack of facilities at the depot in Cornwall is one that kind of connects you and I through our careers, because later in my career at the Environment Agency, I was able to go back and oversee a retrofit of that facilities and put in bathrooms that were accessible to everyone. And so for those of you who don't know, Lisa gave me my first ever senior job and hired me when no one else would, and then got a lot of stick for hiring me. Do you want to share that story?
It was a weird thing because you kind of connected with me kind of on a coaching kind of perspective.
Yeah, they had like a young
like
things. Leader program, didn't they? And connected us up that way.
Yeah, so we kind of got on talking around that, and you were incredible and really ambitious, but had been applying for lots of jobs and coming kind of second generally to people who had like more experience
or were already doing the job.
We're already doing kind of the job or something. And I think you're fantastic. And when we had opportunity and you came for an interview, I was really delighted that to offer you that job. It was really interesting that I got a grief from other people who were like, well, we wanted him, and I was like, well, you kind of had a chance. But it was brilliant. I mean, to have you on the team was so fantastic, and
that's very kind.
Great to see you go on ever since.
So the we were talking about this before the camera started rolling, and the way you offered me that role, I mean, I was in tears after you offered me that role. But do you remember what you said?
I think so. We're both big West Wing fans, aren't we? So I'm saying, do you want to come and jump off a cliff?
Yeah. And it was just that. Do you want to work with me? And it was that made the difference. I've tried to emulate that every time I've made a hire since then, because My experience of the public sector was very hierarchical, and it was like, no, know your role. And you were the exact reverse. You were we're together on this, we're a team, how can we collaborate on it? And I think directly I worked for you for like less than a year, but learned more in that year than at any other chapter, because you let me see things and talk to me about stuff, and that was really different. So thank you.
It's a pleasure.
So when you started, it was totally an old boys network, right? In terms of an organisation and the culture. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences at that point?
Yeah, I think it was a very traditional organisation, and I think the geography was a big part of that as well. So I've talked about the kind of toilets bit, but I can remember, I likewise, was kind of young and ambitious, always just wanted to be the best that I could be, really, and make the biggest difference in that space. And I remember sort of saying, I'm really interested in kind of being a team leader. I think I was 21, 22 at that point, and being told, well, be a bit ahead of yourself, come back when you're 30. And we'll have this kind of conversation.
Yeah, not you need these skills or these experiences, just 9 years will do it.
So there was also kind of a bit of that kind of generally. And I think there was sort of quite kind of like a perceived kind of way of doing things, a way of kind of dressing, a kind of way of being. I think there were kind of issues about women being seen, it was very easy to get labelled kind of aggressive or kind of pushy if you were trying to do things differently, particularly if you're a woman, I think, in some of that space. And then, kind of coming out as a gay woman in that environment as well, caused some real kind of challenges. So it was a big shock to me. I'd been brought in Cornwall. I didn't really have any kind of gay friends or anything. And, when I came out, I kind of needed work to be a safe space in that. And I mean, it just wasn't. So I went from being a kind of grade A performer to a kind of grade D performer, literally overnight, when I kind of next review. And I was saying, kind of why, can you explain this? And my line manager said he didn't want to talk about it. I wasn't allowed to have to take any time off to kind of deal with kind of things that were, happening kind of in my life or anything. So, that was really hard, because it was this real kind of conflict between really being passionate about the environment, really being passionate about the organisation, actually, and the good that I felt that I was doing there. But I kind of couldn't go on being treated like that. And one of the things I was able to do is just look around. And I always believed in that, is taking responsibility for yourself and the choices that you can kind of make. So, looked around for kind of other jobs, both within and outside of the organisation. And I was successful in getting promoted actually to be a team leader in a different region. And one of the things on the back of that, I think, was then sort of the number of people here, because I talked about my experience and people started coming to me and sharing their stories, and it became clear that it was a much kind of broader problem.
Why did you feel brave enough to be able to? Because most people in that context of, okay, I've been open and honest about something, and you've been hit as a result of it, but you still felt able to be brave. How? Where did that come from?
I think I just believe in life that you have a choice. I think, I always ask myself, okay, what is this? What's going on? Can I change it? And if not, what else am I going to do about it? And I think, it was really in that moment was that, that was horrible, but I don't want anybody else to go through that. And I think there's been a driver. I mean, kind of previous kind of part-time job I had when I was at uni, I was sexually harassed, and I was kind of, at this time, I was kind of dealing with it. I knew I was leaving kind of anyway, but then I found out it was happening to other people. And that was, a point when I felt I had to really kind of stand up in that environment. So I think it's always been something that's really mattered to me. I think it goes back into kind of childhood. I was always at school and stuff, was always the one that stood up for people who were being kind of bullied or treated as different in kind of any way. So I think it's been something that's always just mattered to me. And I don't think I cannot do it, if that makes sense.
I've certainly seen it through your leadership style, when we didn't work together, when we did, and then subsequently, that protecting people and looking out for people, certainly a key feature of your leadership, I think.
It really matters, it just genuinely does. So, I mean, that's where the kind of LGBT network came from at the agency, because we just felt a group of us that we just wanted to make things better. And it became really apparent just how many people had just left, like really good people who were really passionate about the work they did, but that they just left the organisation. So, kind of coming together and helping to collect some of those stories and using them as evidence to kind of take in and show people what was happening.
About the need for the network, was there pushback on that as well? When you said, I think we should do something here and be more open and talk about it, was that a battle too?
Yeah, there was a really interesting moment where it kind of collected this, kind of put in, a bit of a business case, small amount of money, to kind of bring some of this together, and it was sort of submitted as part of a wider, paper, as these things are. And the whole rest of the budget for diversity and inclusion, which was a pretty fledgling area at that time, not just at the EA, the whole lot got signed off apart from the bit that I wanted for the network. And the rationale for that was that the director at that time didn't want the organisation taken over by short-haired women in dungarees, which was really interesting. I'd never worn dungarees at work, I should just point out, and I actually had really long hair kind of back then, so I don't think it was a personal comment, but that was kind of where we were at. But again, I'm always about kind of problem solving. We're kind of being bitter at that, and I took that to a different director and said, look, this is why this is mad. I think we need to do this, and they put up the funding, we moved forwards, and the network's done fantastic things. Was the first sort of employee network at the Environment Agency, and it went on to be a model for the Women's Network and for all the fantastic things that they do fantastic things.
It's so funny looking back now from a private sector perspective. I can see an obvious commercial business case for networks and groups of that type from purely a retention and a recruitment perspective, because if you are losing people because they don't feel comfortable, you can put a pound sign on the replacement cost of those talents. So now, partly due to your work and others who've done similar things in different industries, it's so obvious that you'd want to keep that talent there. It's funny, isn't it? When I remember after working with you and moving on to my sort of first director role, I remember being told you have to dress differently in meetings. I have no neck, so wearing a tie is ludicrous. But for those, when we had area director meetings, I used to go in shirt, tie, suit, and you treated differently. And you'd get comments like, Richie's gravitas is improving. That was the word that always made me cringe, because they meant tall, grey-suited and male is what they meant by gravitas.
Generally with a blue shirt.
Yes. Yeah. Me and a pink one with a slightly more flamboyant tie didn't really sit that well. It's such a shame. I'm so happy we've moved past that. And I suppose, has it been fast? Not fast enough, probably. But from an ocean conservation perspective, I love the fact that that's not a thing, and people can be freer to be themselves. But that's only possible because you and others had some pretty bumpy experiences along the way.
I think it does take people to stand up, and show that things can be different. And that's okay. And I think somebody once said to me, this is it wasn't that they didn't think I had the capacity to go on and do other things, but they just said, kind of doing this will be one of the biggest things you ever achieve in your career, because it's allowing other people to kind of be themselves. And that's always, meant a kind of huge amount, because, again, it's not about me, it's about the fact that other people, who perhaps might have left, or who perhaps kept huge parts of them to oneself, which massively affects how you can be and how productive you can be and how much you can enjoy your job, have gone on to do amazing things. And that's really cool.
It's totally cool. And at one stage of your career, you did a lot of work with Stonewall. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I was on the board of Stonewall for 6 years. I mean, the organisation had just achieved kind of so much. So much by kind of influencing, working with government, doing other things.
For people who aren't common, can you explain?
Yeah, so Stonewall is a charity that supports lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people in the UK. Was successful in campaigning for civil partnership, equal marriage, doing a whole load of things about different families, and obtaining kind of legal equality in so many areas, particularly for lesbian, gay, bisexual people. I mean, when I started work, you could be sacked just for being gay. You didn't need anything else. That was
just pause that,
the thing.
It's madness, right? You look now, and it's not that long ago. It's scary. It's really scary. So you've laid out some incredible achievements already. Where did the resilience of that stuff come from, Lisa? So with every, you mentioned the director that didn't approve the budget you needed. I literally saw you in meetings be criticised for things that others were praised for. And my favourite one was when you were yelled at when someone else spoke. Do you remember that one?
I do remember.
That one was absolutely, will you quieten down, Lisa?
It was like, you haven't shut up all day or something, and I hadn't spoken since lunchtime. It was about 3 o'clock. I think so I mean, the kind of broader resilience point, I think it just goes back to, there's something in me, I think there's a lot of people, that thing about values, that thing about, what I stand for, kind of my integrity, that is just so important. I wouldn't be me if I didn't mess for that. And, kind of damn the consequences to just kind of, a large extent on that. It just, I couldn't cope with living my life in a different way than that. So that kind of standing up, which I think then gives you kind of resilience. I think you take that resilience into other aspects of your life. I think that's, made me good at working in instant emergency response, for example, doing media work, kind of all of those things, being a leader, dealing with challenging people things, dealing with tough calls, the calls that you've made, with contentious issues, working with communities, the kind of inherent kind of balances and choices, hard choices that we all need to make. I think that experience, gives you huge kind of resilience and kind of abilities kind of going into that. And I think it comes back to what I talked about earlier in terms of, the thing about choices. I believe, very much, in a tough situation, can I change something? Can I make a difference? And if not, then what else am I going to do about it? And I think that came, some of those things. I had a fantastic career at the Environment Agency. Worked with some incredible people. We're championed and supported by a large number of amazing people. There equally were times when it wasn't where perhaps I was seen as being kind of too successful or having done something too well. I think some of the big media, national spokespeople things, I think that was a bit of a changing point where some people didn't like it, when I was getting kind of praised by Secretary of State for things. And it's not really, it was never about me. Again, it was all about, actually how could you show people who are being affected by flooding what was being done to support them, but also to champion the work of people who are working 24/7 in horrendous conditions to make a difference. And but I think it became clear, around that time, and some of those examples, some of the things that you've named and what have you, that kind of rightly or wrongly and fairly or unfairly, I had become part of the problem. And you can get bitter about that. You can be difficult about that. You can become really part of the problem in an organisation, I think. Or sometimes you have to look up and say, okay, so what next? What's the right thing to do? Where do you take this? And I think one of the things that's been on my mind for a little while, I mean, you're aware of that, was what would it be like to would it be possible to be a chief exec kind of somewhere, to take something, being a director of an area, and you well know, it's a fantastic job, huge kind of geography, huge responsibility, leading huge numbers of fantastic people, but actually what would it be like doing that in an organisation where there wasn't anybody else, but where you absolutely leading that? So that kind of made me start to look out and look at things. And it was brilliant for me being able to go into the Coal Authority chief exec recruitment role, and I just went into it being really clear, this is the type of leader I want to be, this is the type of leader I would be. And the board were fantastic. That was what they wanted, and had this fantastic opportunity to lead a great organisation, and to take it in the direction that I thought was important. Again, first female chief executive at the Coal Authority, and kind of the first one who isn't from a kind of financial or kind of industry or consultancy kind of background as well. So it's been great bringing that environmental kind of approach much more to.
We'll go into the Coal Authority on part 2, but before we leave, as you started talking, I was remembering one of so you did some incredible work during instant response and flooding, and you were the person that was asked to run to the problem while everyone else was coming away from it, and the media were coming to start criticising the EA. You were the one that went in there first and said, "I'm here to answer your questions. We're here to help. What would you like to know?" And that you were the first to do that. And I always remember, after an incident, we'd get a load of responses in from members of the public, but also EA's family members going, "Lisa's my favourite member of the EA," because they'd just seen you. You were the person they knew. You never asked to do that. You never said, "I want to go on that." You didn't want to stand outside in the wet and cold for 20 hours waiting to do a 10-minute piece. And I saw some of that as well. People who didn't stand up, didn't offer to help, or didn't go when asked, but would say, "Well, I wish I'd had that opportunity." Yeah, but you were tucked up warm in your bed. And I remember the Yorkshire floods in the Boxing Day ones, and maybe it was 15 or something. Yeah. So I was making Christmas dinner for my in-laws, got a call going, "This is really bad, you need to be in Yorkshire." I literally put my phone down, went to Yorkshire. As I got there, everyone was in pieces. Looked after the incident room for 2 days before I had to get back to wife and family. The only reason I could get back is because you came up and rescued me. So I rang you and went, I need to go home now. Can you come? And we crossed on the motorway, I think. But you were out on a horse when I rang you. And you were like, yeah, I can't come now. I'm on a horse, but give me an hour or something. And it was amazing. So, yeah, instant response was... And then when I first moved to Devon and Cornwall for director job there, within a couple of weeks, we had the cover act floods. And it was only because of what you taught me to do that as soon as that flood happened, I went straight down there. And the instant room in Cornwall was so far different from the rest of the organisation, it wouldn't open. So I was down there by myself with one other member of the team, and they were, oh, it's only a little flood, we don't need to open. Then all of a sudden it wasn't a little flood, and it was all over the media, and the Secretary of State started arriving. And yeah, I think there was something that even if you just tried to do a really good job for everybody else, sometimes the limelight hit one or both of us, and others didn't particularly love that. So
I think it's a challenge. I think it's, I mean, for me, every home that's flooded is a tragedy. It's the same in my kind of current role. Anybody whose home is affected is, so, they deserve to hear what's going on, to know what's going on. And also, to be fair, huge numbers of staff at the Environment Agency who work incredibly hard, who work, through the night, who perhaps don't see their kids, who, for long periods
especially
of time,
the ops team.
all of that, who work in really tough conditions, it was a real kind of privilege to be able to show that and to talk about the importance of the work that they did.
Yeah, in some ways they were the teams we perhaps felt the most affinity for, because out and about, and the ones that, maybe it's that protectionism thing again, because I think that's a feature of my leadership style as well, that they're the people that are directly out there trying to help others when it's the worst possible conditions. I always loved spending time with the teams in Bugler when they're putting up the flood barriers and things, and the connection with the community there was super, super special. You're right about the impact of flooding on people. So unfortunately this year we had the first flood at one of the properties on the Oxford Conservation portfolio in Shropsham, and the family that lived there were incredible people, rang us as soon as there was an issue. We tried to help as best as possible, and sadly the property was damaged. But they found another place, we're renovating it now, but they've recognised that, climate change is happening, it's impacting us all, flooding is going to happen, but we went, did what we could. They were hugely appreciative of that, and vice versa, and we're trying to make modifications to that house so it doesn't happen again, it's better in future. But we're all going to experience this, right? And until someone's seen flooding up close, they don't realise how devastating it is to people. And remember that cover act one with, there's two houses, one had been flooded years previously, so had been modernised, sockets raised, so that family was straight back in that same day. The next house was caught this time, and I sat for hours with a lady crying on my shoulder. She's like, I've got nowhere else to go, and we helped find them temporary accommodation and things. But when you see flooding firsthand and the impacts of what that's going to be, I think lots of people don't realise climate change is going to hit us that hard close to home.
I think that, the extreme weather, I mean, we see it, as a 24/7 emergency responder, we see that, everybody sees that, you see it in what you do. And it just means that, it's not just about river flooding anymore, or, kind of coastal flooding. I think just the sheer volume of water means that it's affecting people who, haven't experienced that.
Yeah, 1 degree warmer puts 7% more moisture in the atmosphere. We're all going to feel that. Okay, awesome first part, Lisa. Thank you. We'll take a pause, and when we come back, we'll talk about the move to the Coal Authority. Welcome back to part two. So you'd started to lead us into the fact that you decided opportunity was there, time for a change, ready for that chief exec role and leading a new organisation. So there's always that excitement of a new job, however the application or the approach comes. So once you knew the role was coming, how did you think about that next version of you as a leader? Did you think about, I'm going to leave, I like this part of what I do and want to ramp it up, I want to change that bit? Or how sort of purposeful were you thinking about your arrival at the Coal Authority, and how did that kind of work?
I think you absolutely do, don't you? You're really conscious going into a new organisation. What's that mean? What's this opportunity? What's that kind of step up? I think, so kind of reflected on all of that. I think the thing that I most sort of decided, I suppose, consciously in there was to not over process it. So, you do your thing, you have to think, as part of the, when you're thinking yourself into the job, what's your, of course, what you want to achieve, what's your first kind of 30 days, 100 days, all of that stuff, what do you want to do on your first day, all of those things, you think about those things. But I think the key thing for me was not to rush it, because, I like things to be very organised, and I get very passionate about things, and it's really conscious going in there of the fact it was a new experience, a new organisation, and to really listen to that, and to just see what felt natural, and that turned out to be really great because, again, really listen to people, really see what was important, really focused. So the organisation did good stuff. I mean, great people doing great stuff. But to really therefore focus on some of the things that would really help the people side of things. Felt that there could be much more bounce. I've got a thing about bounce in terms of how I measure cultures and organisations. Felt like that people could be more empowered, that there was a lot more about that, and really listening to that and seeing what were different. Listening to people saying, they felt there'd been a lot of initiatives in the past and it felt like they'd bounced from kind of one thing kind of to another. So, how do you really think about that? I believe in kind of evolution, kind of that early to help people make sure that there's a clear narrative from kind of one thing to another. How do you talk about that? How do you really think about engagement? And really being kind of led by that. And it was fantastic, to somebody who, otherwise quite likes to, know where things are going and all of this, but to do that and to let that evolve was actually how naturally it then started to kind of plait back together, kind of like
and
a
you have
like
to constantly sit on your hands and go, no, don't get involved yet, just wait.
Yeah, at times, definitely. So, which doesn't mean you don't, have opinions on things, all of that stuff. Of course you do. Of course I do. Yeah, that was really magical. And therefore it became almost kind of natural what's not. So we focused on our kind of people kind of strategy. We then, became kind of obvious from conversations, not just internally, but also with partners and others, that, it was time to sort of go back and relook at our kind of mission, purpose and values, and kind of move on some of that kind of reshaping. What were the bits that we wanted to dial up and dial down kind of in the plan? What was going to make the kind of biggest difference going forward? And that's on the basis of really trusting your people, fantastic people, really committed, doing great stuff. But where were the areas where we could, so it became obvious kind of early on, for example, that we needed to think much more about how we supported kind of customer and brought that voice much more clearly.
And we literally thinking about that point as you took us there. So someone we both know very well, Sue Brofford, will be listening to this and she'll smile when I say this. One of the things I did not do well enough in my time in the public sector was I was too internally focused. I didn't recognise, my experience was very much I was feeding that internal machine that was demanding more and more and more. And I didn't stop, look up and go, okay, we're serving a customer externally. And you were always amazing at that, the ability to look out and inside a business. And Sue told me I need to be better, and she was right, I did. And that's come later. But how did you balance how much of a cue to take from your customer externally and how much time to look within the organisation, the people? What was your sort of gauge on that?
So I think, the internal, you have to listen to your people, kind of, first of all. You have to understand, learn your business a bit, all of that. But I think that it is so important to hear the voice, both of partners and other people that you work with, and to hear what they would like to be different, what they want to help them to help you more. But also to really try and put yourself in the shoes of some of the customers that you live with. And it is something, I'm really proud of the organisation. We do a bit like flooding, really. We deal with, it's just, for a relatively small organisation, we deal with such a huge range of different things. So, and two of the really big things around that are public safety and subsidence and kind of environmental remediation, mine water treatment. But that piece around, again, when somebody's home is impacted by subsidence, like flooding, it's an absolute tragedy. It's their castle, it's their safe place, it's where their family feel safe. And when something happens, to challenge that, it's huge. And that is to really listen to that. And I think the teams have always done that, well, very thoughtfully. No, we certainly, never take a kind of one size fits all kind of approach. And I remember going to a site really early on where there's a very elderly lady in a property that a mine shaft had opened up under kind of like one corner of the property. She'd lived there all her life. She was in her 90s, had dementia, and the advice from kind of health and social care was that moving her would have killed her. Effectively, the shock would have been just too much. So the teams were incredible in designing. They effectively designed a kind of flat within the sort of front kind of quarter of the house, which included her bedroom, her kind of living room. They put in a sort of temporary kitchen, and there was space for a carer and what have you. But to kind of all intents and purposes, in the world that she was living in at the time, it was the same property. And then that allowed them to jack up the back and to effectively demolish part of it and to fill this show. just, talking to her family, what that had meant. And she went on to live, a very good life for many years after that. And it's those types of things. It's dealing with, if people have disabilities or kind of different needs, it's that whole, how do you stand back and think about what does like for like mean? You always have to be fair about, balancing what you're spending is taxpayers' money. Every pound, very conscious that every pound that we spend is a pound that can't be spent on health or social care or other environmental kind of work. So you always have to find that balance. But what is truly like for like really thought about, you and I might be fine living in a house with a slightly tilty floor. I've done that in old properties.
Right there with you.
If you're a wheelchair user or, have other kind of accessibility needs, that's massive. That's not okay. We've worked recently with a family who had a young person with kind of particular kind of healthcare needs, and again working out what that means. And again, you have to really listen to them and listen to the kind of experts in that. What does that mean, both in terms of how you support them in the short term, because there aren't many rental properties that would meet their needs, but also what does that mean in the long term? And I think it's those things. It's making sure that those voices can kind of cut through, dealing with communities, affected by incidents. And again, I believe you talked about earlier in incidents. I still really believe about that kind of going. So we had a really big incident, mine water flooding during COVID, and we had kind of 100 families kind of out of homes at kind of one point at a time when everything is telling you that being at home is the only safe place to be. So it was a really big thing kind of for them. And I think, being out there and being the face of that, it allows your people to get on and do the great and important work that they want to do. It allows people to vent and say it. And I had people say to me, I don't know why you do this. And I, because everyone's just shouting at you. And I say, but that's my job. That's, it's your right to you need to tell me what you feel. We will continue to do everything that we're able to do to kind of support you behind that. And I think that's really important. Public service is delivering public good, and there's lots of ways of doing that, not just in the public sector, but is really important to me. And doing that, I think with empathy, even when sometimes you have to give hard messages or you can't possibly do everything everyone wants you to, is really important.
And when you reflect back now on, so how long have you been call authority now?
5 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So when you look back at the Lisa that left the EA and the Lisa that's leading the call authority now, how would you describe that you've changed as a leader, if at all?
I think you have to kind of learn and grow, don't you? Otherwise, it goes on. There's so much still to learn and to keep growing. That's kind of always the case. I think the thing that I've kind of I probably continue to work on kind of through my career, but I think has been even more important here, and perhaps I've felt that I've had the space and support even more here to do some of that, is that again, it's that try, and I do it better than others, some days better than others, but again, that kind of create that space, create a space for others to not want to leap into kind of solution mode, to listen. I think I've learned that I do some of my best thinking sometimes when I'm not thinking about something. Like complex problems sometimes are best kind of parked in your head for a day or two, and then suddenly you have that sort of light bulb moment, don't you? So
is that clean the horses out? Is that walking? Is that when
yeah. The horses are great for that.
It's mixed in the gym for me.
But it is, it's something that's totally different, isn't it? It's when you suddenly have that, oh my word, I know how to do that now, or where to go next, kind of with that. I think that then, I think it's really, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I think one of the really interesting things, I'm sure you feel this, being a kind of chief exec or MD or other bit, is around, it's this constant balance, because you have to have enough confidence and enough belief that the direction that you're taking the organisation with, is the right one, and to give it enough oomph and to bring people, to feel kind of inspired enough to come with you. You have to have that. But at the same time, you have to have enough kind of humility and kind of vulnerability to know that you get stuff wrong, or, there's no sort of magic plan and you have to adapt it. And it's kind of where you are on that those two axes, I think, at any point in time. And there's no magic spot, and sometimes we hit it kind of, where we are on that kind of better than others. But for me, I think that's that kind of realization of both things are equally true and important, and that makes it hard, right? Because there's never any sort of like perfect answer or right answer, but you have to be constantly thinking about what is that balance.
the having to sit on your hands, the having to be more and more comfortable with delegating is a challenge. I saw with sort of corporate and public sector leaders, it's also so true of founders in the private sector, because so when we started Oxygen Conservation, there was me and Dan. So if it wasn't a pure environmentally related issue, I was essentially director of ... until we brought someone in way better than me at doing that. So where it shows really well now is, so when we acquire a new site, we put together a proposal document for like the first 12 months of ownership and what it might look like. And we look back now and, on the first ones, I wrote every section except the environmental statement and I took the photos for it. They're not as good as Josh's by any stretch. And you could see, so when Josh came in, the photos got better. When Dave came in, the risk assessment got better. When Ellie Adams, our FD, came in, the financial information is so much more sophisticated. And Fiona, our property director, now that section's amazing. And I can see where a better version of me has come in and picked up all those different bits. But you're still used to doing everything and can dive in on it. Where I think it is much easier to leave it, when you've got someone who is genuinely better than you at something, it's much easier not to meddle. And when you've made the choice of that person, it's easier to let them fly, I think.
And it is that really important thing. I think I try very much have that kind of mindset that if there's genuinely feels like a reason why I need to do something or I need to step into it, you do it in that moment. But the important thing then is to go, okay, so something's not quite right here. So who do I need to bring in? What do I need to do? We did a lot of that in terms of sort of further professionalising our emergency response capability. We became a category 2 responder. It's a technically, but is a kind of formally recognised kind of instant response organisation early this year. And that was that. We've dealt with some really big incidents recently without, or a few years ago, without some of that broader capability. Not the technical things, we can do that kind of all day, but some of that broader, how do you support communities affected, all of that. And so there've been times where I've had to roll up my sleeves, rightly you have to, it's the right thing to do to get involved. But then the right thing to do is to pull back and say, okay, so how do we build that capability? How do we professionalise it? How do we bring in people better than me to do this and to be resilient for the future? I think that's really important.
When you are thinking about bringing in talent and new additions to the team, where do you balance the talent versus character question? So, which is more important to you? How do you make that call?
I think they're always, you have an engineer, you need to have somebody who's got an engineering character, all of that sort of thing. It's not take away from any sort of importance of technical things. But for me, I think if you have somebody with the right attitude and the right passion around things, you can teach kind of skills and what have you. So for me, that kind of values fit, that kind of commitment, that desire to do things and to make a difference, you can't train that. That's so important.
Yeah. Where we've had, so most of our inflow is from our amazing internship program, which has just been shortlisted for a national award for marketing. Well done, Elle, who's in the room. Really well. Year one with an intern program, we had 100 applicants. Great. Year two, no paid advertisement of any kind. We went from 100 to 455 applicants because of the brand that Elle and Abby and Josh had built. So thank you. Great job. So a lot of our through flow is intentionally early career professionals or people changing careers to get new ideas in. All the people who've secured permanent jobs with us are not because of their technical qualifications at all. It has been culture, work ethic, commitment, and are they prepared to roll up their sleeves, do whatever's needed to do for a growing business? And does the rest of the team want them to be here?
Yeah. And
that's been the bit that's really, really exciting. We spoke with Lance Bradley, who was the former chief exec at Gloucester Rugby Club at a previous podcast. And they had Danny Cipriani, one of the most talented rugby players of his generation on that team. And they said to Lance, are the rules the same for someone who's that talented? And he went, of course they're not. But it is a balance up to a point. So talent will get you so far, but it can't upset the balance of the rest of the team.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So let's go from the Coal Authority to the Wildlife Trust.
Yeah.
So you have another hat. Can you tell our audience
I have a few, but that one is I'm chair of the Birmingham and Black Country Wildlife Trust. Thank you, Richard.
Would you like to tell that story?
Richard phoned me up one day and said, I've met this fantastic woman, Delia, fantastic, the chief executive of the Birmingham Black Country Wildlife Trust.
Hey, Delia.
I think you should have a chat with her. Like, she's great. She'd really benefit from a kind of coaching conversation. So I'm out with Delia. We had a few discussions around things, and then I kind of wake up one day and I chair of the Wildlife Trust. So
it was I should have gone into recruitment. There was, no, I shouldn't. Sorry, Lee. I shouldn't. One of our friends is an amazing recruiter, so I'm not going to say this. There was a period, so when I came out of the public sector, I was ready for something completely different. So I found it a difficult fit for a lot of reasons. You were always way, way better at the sort of governance and structural organisation because of your time with Paul, I think, and building a lot of that for the EA. You were always blown away by how amazing you were at that. I always found it difficult to sort of fit in that structure. I needed as much freedom as possible to play. I remember coming out of the public sector and I was approached by 5 or 6 wildlife trusts. Derbyshire had a great conversation with them and ended up introducing them to Amanda Allah. He said, she's way better than me. Please speak to Amanda. That's it. Because I couldn't face the idea of a big boardroom meeting at that point. I was like, I just want to go out and do something in the environment. And then met Delia as well. She's like, we're really looking for a chairperson. I was like, and she was looking at me and I caught her eye and I was like, no, I've got this amazing person. And they didn't want me at all. You would have been 100 times better than I am at doing that. So can you tell us a little bit about Birmingham Wildlife Trust, the sort of thing they do and what the purpose of that organisation is?
Yeah, Birmingham Black Wildlife Trust is a fantastic organisation, part of the broader kind of wildlife movement, but a charity in its own right. And one of the most urban trusts in the country, which is one of the things that kind of really excites me about working kind of with them. So their ability to work in the heart of the conurbations, not just Birmingham but across the kind of Black Country area, working with schools, incredible kind of diversity.
So many of those places, the environment's hidden really, isn't it, from people, like rivers and culverts and things. And I think what I've loved about sort of Delia's work with her background about connecting people with social and cultural things has been trying to open that up. And
it's the thing, really bring people in. That's, I think, where the Wildlife Trust is just such an important part of that. We've got a couple of sites which we bring schools into, and other people and cultures and communities who just don't get to touch the environment enough. And I think it's so important that it's accessible to everybody, and we've got more to do in that. But yeah, that's what's really, really exciting about Birmingham Black Country Wildlife Trust, and the opportunity kind of ahead as well.
And I've noticed you've been quite active on LinkedIn lately about supporting people, calling for a wider range of individuals and backgrounds to get involved in boards and be trustees. Yeah. Can you talk about why you think that's important?
Yeah, I think that's hugely important. I mean, I think that equality, again, it's about raising up voices, about making sure there's proper representation across everything we do, whether that's in organisations, whether it's charities, public sector, anything else. It's really important that we're shaped and informed by people from all backgrounds and cultures. And when I came into the council as trustee in the first instance at Birmingham Black Country, you kind of look around the table and I was the youngest person kind of by a lot, not other than staff, all white, all really similar kind of academic kind of backgrounds and what have you. We represent an area that is one of the most diverse kind of parts of the country. So what's been really exciting in that is increasing the diversity of the board there, bringing youth trustees, just getting different voices just helps us to do better as an organisation. And I believe in that, passionately at all levels. That should be the case on public bodies. It should be the case in business. We need to hear different voices, different things. Even more important, I think, because we, facing the type of environmental climate challenges that we do, we talk about just transition, all of that. How can you do that if you only have, one kind of common view or experience, life experience?
Trying to represent a book from one chapter, right?
It's just...
I'd be amiss if I didn't shout out to Rebecca Broad, who's been the most vocal campaigner for young people and certainly those with neurodiversity as well on board. So she's amazing stuff, and she's coming on the podcast soon as well, which is great.
Yeah, she's fantastic. It's a real pleasure to work with her.
So you've had so far the most incredible career. What's next on the bucket list, Lisa? What are the ambitions? What might the next challenges look like? Don't worry, I'm not trying to persuade her to leave the colophone or the Wildlife Trust, but in the future, X number of months, years, etc. What might happen next?
Yeah, there's still plenty I want to do here. Absolutely, I think, and some of we haven't talked about some of the great kind of innovation, kind of opportunity kind of things that I really, really want to build on. So one of the really fantastic things is you're aware we've been doing at the Coal Authority is about how do we use our assets for the future, for the kind of low carbon future. And this year, the first sort of large scale mine water heat scheme came online in Gateshead in northeast England. And I was up there the other day, and it just, fantastic. 6 megawatts of heat kind of potential. Relatively cheap, £16 million scheme, and it just is making such a difference. It, not only will it significantly kind of reduce carbon from the heating needs of that city. It's already providing heat to council buildings, other businesses across there, social housing. But, soon the hospital, a huge range of other buildings will come online, commercial buildings as well. So it's going to be a huge part of the decarbonisation effort. But also, like hearing real life stories. So they'd had an event a few days before I was up there with people in the community, and say, people like a wheelchair user who was too scared to shower previously because the cost of their electric shower they couldn't afford, and actually, now because the price point of this, that they're able to shower on a regular basis. Just stories like that, in terms of what that means to the cost of living kind of position, right here, right now. Just so important, in terms of, what's possible on social value. And I feel really strongly about this. I feel, mining, it built our nations. It is who we are, kind of for now. But equally has obviously contributed also to a huge amount of challenge. But being able to use those assets, and let's not forget that coal mines, are a nationalised asset. They're owned by the government. Being able to use those assets as part of the low carbon kind of future is just so important. So lots to do on that. Lots of other challenges around dealing with and treating some of the last deep mines, the water, the saline water that's coming up from those, and the kind of new and innovative things with these. So lots to do there. But it's always, for me, it's always about how can I make a difference? How can I do things? It's fantastic being able to be involved with the Wildlife Trust. And I also recently joined the board of a major kind of waste and materials recycling company, which is really interesting. I'm learning lots. My first foray into the private sector, but a company that do fantastic things in terms of whether that's and will be a really important part as well of the transition. So in terms of renewables need recycling too, right? So that's really important. What they're doing to bring in wide scale use of renewables, driving on their own sites and therefore across industry, the use of electric kind of large plant, establishing standards for recycled steel reuse and green steel. So that's fantastic. In the same way that AC are doing incredible things, the private sector will lead a lot of this, and there's such a range of things that we need. And it's just looking for those. If for me, the way I think I can make some of the best difference is some of those areas that are about the interface between kind of people and kind of the environment. So I know you ask, your own staff, what does kind of scalable conservation mean to them? For me, it has to be around also about industrial sites and about urban sites and about how do we stitch the patchworks of things together. And that has to be about encouraging and exciting and inspiring people, because it needs to be. We're never going to go in and be able to own all of that. So how do we bring people together? One of the really exciting things, as waste companies being saying, a scrapyard for the first time that has, invested in building biodiversity, and some of that's enabled by biodiversity credits and what have you that make it work for businesses. But see a scrapyard that has invested in the biodiversity around its site and made different operational decisions in order to maximise that. That's the future. That's what we need. We need that network of everybody coming together, whether that's in the public sector, charity sector, the private sector, everybody doing their piece.
That's a perfect conclusion, Lisa. I owe a huge chunk of my career to you and the inspirational leadership you gave me and the opportunities and stuff. And from the day we started the podcast, I had a vision of being able to sit down and share some of the things you've taught me with everyone else out there. So you are incredible, and thank you so much for your friendship, advice and guidance. And I just love having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
This is done.
Honor.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.